I'm surrounded by some of the brightest political minds in the country who'll be discussing and debating the predictions and the results. We're also joined by the giants of social media, by Twitter and by Facebook, who'll be giving us their unique insights into what you're talking about through the night. We'll also look at how you voted and what that means for the next few days and the next few years. Tom, well, I have to say there were gasps in this room when news of that opinion, the exit poll broke. Team Facebook is analysing your reaction to it right now. I've got The Guardian's Owen Jones. He's doing a Twitter Q&A, hashtag opinion room. Let me introduce you to my first guest, Daniel Finkelstein, the Tory peer and Times columnist. Philip Collins, his Times colleague, who was, of course, Tony Blair's speechwriter. And Miranda Green, who was Paddy Ashdown's press secretary. Well, when I turned to look at your reaction...
My mouth fell over.
Your mouth fell, and it's only just closed.
Okay,
Daniel Finkelstein.
So it's like...
Philip Collins, let's just digest that number for Labour.
It's very low, a bit like Danny. I wonder if he will probably end up as Prime Minister. The gap between Labour and the Conservatives is so large that it makes coming from second place to have any kind of role in government very, very difficult.
Even if the SNP figures are right with those predictions in the exit poll, 58 seats, Labour wasn't expecting anything like this in terms of the damage.
No, on the contrary, all today has been a story of Labour optimism. Anyone who's talked to people in politics today has been thinking it's moving towards Labour, not away from Labour. So it just shows how much everybody knows. Out there in the field, they're all thinking they're going to win, and clearly a lot of them have not.
Shy Tories?
I think there's a very good reason to be not shy enough, in my view, most of them. But clearly, if this is at all right, this exit poll, then the opinion polls that we've all been following for weeks have been horribly wrong.
What about reluctant Tories? Tories who never voted Tory before, but this time, perhaps the polling showed, didn't it, that people were keen to see this coalition continue? Is that part of this picture?
Not so keen if they've only voted for 10 Liberal Democrats. I mean, funnily enough, the Tories and the Liberal Democrats on the exit poll come to exactly 326, although it's hard to see membership of a coalition with 10 members of Parliament if you're absolutely wiped out like that.
Miranda, if the predictions are correct, I mean, Nick Clegg was saying we will be surprised positively by the results, but this exit poll, what is he doing right now? How's he going to react to that figure of 10?
It's a terrible figure. I mean, if that turns out to be the result, it'll be an absolute Lib Dem. But I think that story is right. Lib Dem losses Tory's largest party, but I don't think the scale of it feels quite right, so we'll have to see. But of course, that final Lib Dem tally, whether it's a total disaster or a respectable showing, somewhere in the mid to high 20s, will make a big difference to what sort of government we might be able to see.
Yeah, it's crucial, actually. I think it's crucial. The Lib Dem number is crucial, because if that is significantly wrong, it will change the nature of the government.
Because if it's that low, it's quite difficult for the Lib Dems not to just try and regroup, lick their wounds and recover.
Yeah.
But if they have a respectable showing, they can be a part of government
and real damage to the smaller party in a coalition, clearly, if those numbers are right. Well, the other key question tonight, of course, is the Scottish question. There was talk of them getting a clean sweep, the SNP in Scotland. The numbers are saying 58, which is as near as you can possibly get. David Torrance is with me. He is the biographer of both Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond. Look, Nicola Sturgeon has had a remarkable campaign, but if those figures are correct, the SNP has overturned some massive majorities in Scotland.
Absolutely. I mean,
like north of the border, Labour have been really punished. Why do you think that punishment has come? Do you think it's to do with the referendum, or is it more long-term than that?
there's been a long term.
OK, David Torrance, thank you. Well, clearly there's lots more to talk about in terms of the SNP numbers and those numbers in general. Lots to digest as people are just taking on board what the figures we've just seen are.
Well, to Nina in the opinion room.
Thank you, Tom. Let's go back to the two main parties now. Daniel Finkelstein is still here, as is Philip Collins. I'm joined by Matthew Parris, the former Tory MP and Times writer, and by The Guardian writer Owen Jones. Matthew Parris, at 10 to 10, you were not confident. Now you've seen those numbers. What's your reaction?
I don't.
Yeah, you called it. You called for a Tory minority. You thought it would go that way.
I did, and I was expecting to have a lot of egg on my face by tomorrow morning. Maybe not quite so much egg.
And Owen, you said that you might go a little bit green if it was bad numbers for Labour. Bit queasy looking.
I would see.
Yeah,
I thought you meant I was going to defect to the Green Party.
No, I don't know. Is it that bad a night? I'm not sure. But in terms of the numbers, when we've been mulling over these numbers and the possible combinations, it was never going to be that bad if the exit
if the exit polls correct, those who were responsible for that catastrophic strategy.
Philip Collins, is it just about Scotland? What about the campaign itself and also 5 years of Labour being in opposition?
Yeah, it's not justable. We're not here at the moment on those numbers, but we're not very far away from being the territory where there isn't a government to be had out of these numbers.
Daniel, you've advised William Hague, you've advised John Major. What would you be advising David Cameron right now? Because as Philip says, it's not that straightforward.
The first thing is to wait. Because we don't know whether the numbers are correct, and it's very important not to get ahead of ourselves. 15 lower. I think it is actually too early to reach conclusions, even though these are incredibly striking, and your first conclusion is, well, David Cameron is back, he's won the election. Actually, things could still be quite difficult because the Conservatives, that number is not a majority. A long-term issue for the Conservatives is to consider why that isn't the case. If you've got a very popular leader and Ed Miliband is an unpopular leader of the Labour Party, why doesn't the Conservative Party get a majority? But that's for another time. The most important thing David Cameron has to do now is wait to see what the numbers are, and also to remember that 316 isn't a majority.
And Owen Jones, you talked a lot about Scotland, but what about the Kinnock factor? What about Ed Miliband himself? In the end, did it come down to people agonising in the polling booth, perhaps wanting to vote Labour, but not quite convinced that he was prime ministerial material?
Well, there's always a twofold problem.
Can I do that, though, with that issue? The problem for Ed Miliband wasn't the attack on him. The reason that the attack came to Ed Miliband is because he didn't convince people. Right from the beginning, that was obviously a political weakness for Labour. Now, if you were running Labour's campaign, and you saw the Conservative leader was obviously a weakness, like you possibly did during the period when Ian Duncan Smith was a leader, you go for the weakness. And naturally speaking, people tried to highlight the fact that Ed Miliband would be Prime Minister if you elected Labour. That was going to be a weakness.
Look, as I've said, that failure to communicate properly was always there from the very start with Ed Miliband. It was always stabbed the nation in the back.
I want to mediate a bit, because I slightly agree with you on the British press. However, I think there's a real danger that the Labour Party uses this as its get-out clause, its excuse. No, I'm not saying you're doing that, but I think there will be an analysis in the Labour Party that we've been in some way victimised, and that this is a principal cause of a poor performance.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there for now. We'll come on to the press's role in this campaign. We've also got Adam Dant here, the election sketch writer, who's only got about probably 10 hours left of your whole campaign shift. But,
trying to make an exit poll look visually interesting.
Good luck with that. And just a reminder that if you want to join in any of the debate that you're hearing here tonight, we're on #OpinionRoom. Tom.
Well, listen, we're waiting.